Stop. Inhale a breath of bitter cold air. Your phone screen sits silent, but inside it, an entire storm of anxiety is surging through your chest. Why? Have you ever realized that what's keeping you awake isn't necessarily what she is doing, but the feeling that you're being pulled away from the center of yourself, little by little? Because her prolonged silence isn't an accident. It's naked evidence. It exposes a truth you've been trying to deny. You're losing control. The anxiety rising in you isn't proof of fiery love. It's the primal fear of abandonment, the psychological resistance to a shift in the power dynamic you didn't even notice. A shift happening right beneath your feet. And if you listen closely, you'll hear that fear isn't only coming from an unanswered message, but from a quieter question. If she leaves, what will I have left? You built yourself a prison out of a sweet illusion called fair exchange. You believed that if you poured in enough kindness, unconditional availability, and steady support, you could buy loyalty, acceptance, and above all, her emotional safety. Sounds reasonable, right? But then you look back and realize you've been giving as an obligation, while receiving as if it were a favor granted. This is lethal innocence. You signed a psychological contract where your kindness becomes the currency you pay for her presence and approval. You thought that when you handed over your heart, she would be obligated to hold it gently. How long have you believed that? And how many times have you asked yourself why the harder you try, the more everything slips out of your hands? Wake up. Kindness is not the currency of desire. You've seen it. Kind men get ignored. People pleasers get locked permanently in the friend zone. The man willing to sacrifice everything is the one she respects the least. Why does this cruel paradox exist? Have you ever considered that the problem isn't that you're not good enough, but the way you're pricing yourself? Because unconditional availability is death. It creates absolute predictability. And in the moment you become predictable, her psyche produces a cold sound. Contempt. When you play the role of the always available safety pillow, you unknowingly activate the shadow in her, the part that craves challenge, that doubts what comes too easily. She doesn't need you. She can possess you. And no one desires what they already fully own without effort. That's hard to hear. But sometimes, the hardest truth is the one that unlocks your freedom. This is nature's iron law, a Machiavellian truth. Human nature does not respect what voluntarily begs to be kept. From an evolutionary biology perspective, absolute availability signals a resource of low value, a resource that requires no competition. And as you hear that, ask yourself bluntly, are you trying to buy safety by paying too much until you turn yourself into something anyone can take without appreciating? Psychology doesn't reward availability. It rewards controlled instability. Desire isn't built on the comfort of guaranteed commitment. It's built on tension, on strategic distance, and on the immovable psychological principle of scarcity and exchange. But remember, if you treat these ideas as tips and tricks, you'll get lost. The point isn't to play games. The point is to learn how to stand upright inside yourself. Niccolo Machiavelli, the father of dark strategy, wasn't evil. He was simply a cold anatomist of human nature. He dissected and revealed a truth modern society, in its performative morality, tries to hide from you. Maybe you grew up in a culture that taught you being good is enough, being sincere will be returned. But human emotional life doesn't run like a fairy tale. He knew that people at their core are ungrateful, fickle, deceptive, and always hiding. That isn't bitterness. It's survival psychology. Why are they ungrateful? Because gratitude is a debt, and the shadow in human beings always tries to maximize personal gain while minimizing psychological cost. They will switch loyalty the moment they discover a stronger resource, because fear of loss is always stronger than gratitude for what was received, a core principle of psychological egoism. And when you accept this as reality, you don't become cold. You become clear-eyed. Machiavelli understood. Power is never gifted to the virtuous. It is seized by those who have strategy and the will to act. The virtuous often become victims because they prioritize appearance over reality, and their vulnerability becomes a public invitation to be manipulated. But the point here isn't that you must become ruthless. It's that you must stop being naive about protecting yourself. You're here because you're exhausted from being passive in your own relationships. You're tired of chaos, murky psychological games, and passive-aggressive silence. A control tactic designed to drag you into their circle of anxiety. You feel confused by calculated ambiguity, what dark psychology calls fogging, keeping you guessing until you lose your footing. And if you're listening like an American who's used to speaking plainly, you'll feel just how maddening that ambiguity is, because it makes you doubt your own perception. You want to understand why some people seem to command attention effortlessly, while you have to work like a slave just to earn temporary respect. The answer, I promise you, isn't your looks. It isn't the number in your bank account. Those things are only a thin coat of paint that chips easily, because they're external validation. They offer only temporary power. Real power, the kind that makes other people adjust their behavior around you, rests in a cold, unforgiving concept, the frame. The frame is the psychological reality you impose on your environment. It's the inner steadiness that doesn't wobble, the conviction that your emotional reality is sovereign. The frame is why, when two people walk into a room, only one shapes the unspoken rules, and the other complies. It is the supreme strategy of power. We're going to apply the ruthless efficiency of Machiavellian political strategy to what people call the chaotic world of emotion. Because beneath the emotional surface, relationships are an uncompromising negotiation over power and social status. And before we go deeper, I want you to answer one question. Slowly, in those negotiations, which chair are you sitting in? The evaluator's chair or the beggar's chair? First principle, the economy of absence. Scarcity doesn't create value. It reveals value. Face the harshest truth in psychology. If air were sold, you'd only pay any price when you were about to drown. That's when air becomes scarce. Right now, you are free air. You're everywhere. You overflow. You reply instantly, with no delay. You clear your schedule the moment the other person shows even a fragile spark of interest. You think you're showing devotion. But in behavioral psychology, you're signaling low value, signaling a deficiency, a lack of an independent purpose outside this relationship. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "Familiarity breeds contempt." The more a leader is seen, the less the people fear him and the less they respect him. That principle applies perfectly to personal attraction. Contempt isn't personal hatred. It's the removal of mystery, the strongest fuel of desire. When you're constantly present, you deprive the other person of the most addictive drug in the human brain, imagination. The brain hates a void. It's wired to fill uncertainty. When you aren't there, she is forced to think about you. She is forced to wonder what you're doing, who you're with, whether you're thinking about her. In that foggy space, her mind begins to overwork. It creates a version of you, a projection of an ideal self, a character built from her own desires and fears. This is the idealization effect. That version is stronger, more mysterious, and far more addictive than the real you. But you steal that away. You suffocate attraction with dense presence. To control the dynamic, you must master the art of calculated absence. Calculated absence is not toxic ghosting meant to manipulate emotions. It's reprioritizing. Real power isn't in petty mind games. It's in authenticity. When you are genuinely busy building your empire, training your body, sharpening your mind, your absence is no longer a tactic. It becomes a natural byproduct of your value. You aren't punishing her with silence. You're simply refusing to reward her lack of priority with your own anxiety. Remember, humans are wired to chase what retreats. It's the hunter instinct. If you always run toward her, you force her to run away just to maintain the minimum distance required for tension and desire. Stop running. Stand still in your purpose. Turn your back and walk toward your goals. And watch how fast she turns to chase. Burn this into your mind. My absence is expensive. And right here, pause for a beat. If you've made it this far, leave a short comment to yourself. What in your life have you been neglecting because you always put someone else first? Are you building your empire, or are you building a house on someone else's foundation? Second principle, emotional instability and the mechanism of intermittent reinforcement. The human brain is wired to love patterns. We seek stability to feel safe. But the moment a pattern is established, the brain loses respect and shifts into boredom. Look at the slot machine, the ultimate symbol of behavioral psychology. It pays out randomly. That uncertainty, that swing between reward and deprivation, creates an intense dopamine effect. In psychology, this is called intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive mechanism there is. It keeps the target trapped in endless hope and anxiety. Most men are books that have already been finished. Predictable in their kindness, predictable in their anger, or predictable in their insecurity. When you're a book that's been read to the end, you're no longer a mystery, you're a utility. She knows exactly what to say, which button to press to trigger your response. You become an emotional vending machine. This is the deep cause of contempt. You get demoted from partner to emotional support software. To escape this pathetic role, you must learn Machiavelli's lesson. The prince must be both lion and fox. The lion represents strength and decisiveness. The fox represents intelligence, cunning, and the ability to evade. You must break your own behavioral pattern. This isn't chaos. It's strategic calibration. If you're usually the calm fox, suddenly release a moment of fierce, intense, lion-like passion. If you're usually affectionate, withdraw. Become cold and analytical for a day. This sudden shift isn't driven by malice. It's meant to reset boundaries. It sends a powerful, icy message. My affection isn't a fixed salary. It's commission. It must be earned. When you stop behaving like someone ready to serve unconditionally, you trigger fear of loss in the other person. When she can't predict your reaction, what does she have to do? She has to pay attention. She has to study you. She has to tread carefully around you, because she can't be sure whether your next move will be praise or a cold withdrawal. That cognitive effort is the seed of obsession. She's investing mental energy into decoding you. When you become an unsolved problem, you become attractive. Most men are emotional mirrors. If she's happy, they're happy. If she turns cold, they panic and try to please. You let her weather decide your climate. To control the frame, you must become your own weather system. You must remain calm while she creates chaos. When she realizes she can't push a button and instantly get the reaction she wants, the mechanism flips. Instead of expecting validation from you, she begins seeking it. She starts asking herself, what is he thinking? What does he want? And the moment a woman has to ask herself that question, you shift from approval seeker to the object that must be decoded. That's when power lands in your hands. Third principle, Narcissus's mirror. The validation strategy. We are all narcissists. Human nature bends toward the self. Machiavelli never made the naive mistake of trying to impose his will directly on others. He understood that to control people, you don't tell them what you want. You reveal to them what they already crave. And what does a person crave more than power, money, or beauty? They crave being seen, being understood, being affirmed that the self inside them matters. Most men fail because they use an outdated strategy. Self-promotion. They brag. In reality, they are performing insecurity. They are begging, desperately, for the other person's approval. You must become the mirror, not the reflected object. Speak less. Listen more, but listen with deep, focused intensity. You don't just hear their words, you penetrate their psychological layers. You ask questions no one dares to ask. Questions that cut through the persona, the social mask they've carefully built. You're speaking directly to their shadow. the selfish ambitions, buried wounds, the raw and darker parts of themselves they never dare bring into the light. When you analyze her, when you see the flaws, the cracks, the imperfect parts she tries to hide, you create a psychological bond so deep it produces an illusion of destiny. That connection is manufactured. She feels it because you're reflecting her idealized self back to her. You're giving her a stage, and the spotlight is the feeling of fully existing. You're the one holding the mirror. You have full control over when you raise it and when you set it down. When you provide intense, deep validation, the target becomes addicted to it. It activates the dopamine reward system in their brain. And then you withdraw. When you stop asking, stop looking at her with that fierce intensity. When the mirror disappears, an emptiness and insecurity rush in. She will do anything to get that mental dose back. She will chase not you, but the powerful reflection of herself she saw in your eyes. She has developed emotional dependency. Power lies in validating her effort, her intelligence, and especially her shadow. Confirm that you see those hidden corners, and that you can accept them. You make her feel exposed and absolutely safe at the same time. And that is a chain stronger than steel. You don't just gain her feelings. You seize the center of her self-awareness. But here, you must remind yourself, deep understanding can heal, and it can also harm if you use it as a tool. Do you want to be the one who creates safety, or the one who creates dependency? Your answer will decide who you are in your own story. Fourth principle, destroy the pedestal. Set the price. There is a fatal system error in how your mind operates, a vulnerability your opponent has exploited for a long time. You've been programmed by Hollywood in fake fairy tales. That program convinces you women are goddesses, pure, perfect beings of light you must kneel to worship. This is the pedestal effect. You worship her because you fear her rejection and your own weakness. You use admiration to buy approval, an unequal, degrading transaction. If you treat her like an A-list star, she has no choice but to treat you like a fan. Fans are anonymous spectators. They're allowed to watch, not to participate. By placing her on a pedestal, you're volunteering for the role of the passive one, the lesser audience member. Women are wired to operate by the principle of hypergamy. They date men of higher value or equal. They do not date down. By placing yourself beneath her, you send an unmistakable biological signal. I am not your equal. This is the dumbest bet you can make. You're announcing your value is so low you must use submission to buy attention. This triggers a strong psychological response in her, disdain and lack of respect. To control the dynamic, you must act ruthlessly and decisively. Destroy the pedestal. Look at her eye to eye, through the gaze of evaluation, not worship. That is the difference between a servant and a king. This requires the willingness to confront and set boundaries, the willingness to disagree. You must be able to argue strongly when she's wrong, the willingness to challenge. You must be willing to question her low-standard behavior. When a beautiful woman is used to every man around her stuttering and nodding along with everything she says, the man who calmly states, "I think you're wrong about that," is an electric shock to her cognitive system. That shock serves two crucial purposes. Her beauty loses its leverage over you, and you prioritize personal truth. Your standards matter more to you than her temporary approval. Stop apologizing for your existence. Stop laughing at jokes that aren't funny. Stop agreeing with opinions you find shallow. If she crosses a line, correct her. Not with anger, but with calm amusement, like you're correcting a mischievous child. Don't operate from the frame of, "I hope she likes me." Shift into the frame of control and evaluation. Is she good enough for me? Fifth principle, the sovereign's weapon, silence. This isn't just advice. It's Machiavelli's teaching. The quietest person, the most restrained speaker, is the one who holds real power. When you speak, you spend energy and reveal what you hold. Silence is infinite capital. In any confrontation or negotiation, the one who rushes to fill the space is the one who loses. They reveal a basic fear of uncertainty, the anxious need to control where things are going. Why do you talk too much? It isn't politeness. It's anxiety. You over-explain. Try to clarify every corner because you fear being misunderstood. Every unnecessary word is a drop of mystery and power spilled. The more you explain, the less you're needed. If you expose your entire self, your past, your pain, your longing, on the first date, you turn yourself into a solved puzzle. You become a book that's already finished. The human brain obsesses over what's missing. The Zeigarnik effect shows we remember unfinished tasks, unfinished stories, far more than what's complete. Be an eternally unfinished puzzle, forcing the other person to invest mind and time to find the answer. When people invest, they attach. Use silence like a precise instrument. When the other person tries to provoke you, throws emotional tests at you, your response should be zero. Never hand them control over your emotions. Look at them with calm, blank, unreadable eyes. Let the silence stretch, long enough to make them uncomfortable, long enough that they feel compelled to add more words to fill it. The tension will convert into anxiety on their side. They will rush to fill your silence with excuses, explanations, or worse, seeking your approval. Your silence quietly declares, "I'm analyzing you." The fear of rejection now belongs to them. Before answering a question, even a small one, create a deliberate gap, 3 seconds. Breathe deeply. Hold eye contact. Then speak. That tiny pause destroys the other person's autopilot, forcing them to shift from listening to waiting. It signals calculated control, the cold composure of someone weighing the value of each word. It makes even your simplest words carry the weight of 1,000 pounds of gold. Sixth principle. The willingness to walk away. Absolute independence. This is the ultimate lever in dark psychology, the one thing you cannot fake. The absolute readiness to leave and never look back. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler should not rely on others' goodwill, but must rely entirely on his own strength. In the world of power dynamics, dependence is a chain. Independence is leverage. If you need her, she owns you. If you like her, want her around, but can live well without her, you own the world. Most men accept being trapped in terrible situations. Why? Because they negotiate from weakness. The deepest fear isn't losing the girl. It's fear of the void, fear of isolation, fear of facing your own shadow when there's no outside distraction. This is the sunk cost fallacy applied to emotion. They would rather endure current misery than accept the loss required to walk away. And women, with an instinctive sixth sense, always detect that hidden desperation. She knows you're more afraid of being alone than you are of being treated badly. And then, she won't just disrespect you, she will control you. The moment you truly internalize that you are the prize, everything changes. You must cultivate a life so spiritually rich, driven by purpose and vision so large, that losing her becomes an inconvenience, not a tragedy that collapses you. This is the option value effect. When you have many options, not just romantic, but goals, work, and more, dependence on a single outcome disappears, and your power multiplies. If your walls are made of paper, easily torn by emotion or pleading, she will feel unsafe. She will unconsciously test you endlessly. But if your walls are stone, if your no means absolutely no, only then can she relax into her feminine energy. She can only be led by a man who knows exactly where he's going, with or without her. This is love's painful paradox. You only keep what you're willing to lose. You clicked here because you crave power, a psychological mechanism that could nullify her free will. But this search for external power is the oldest, most predictable trap in human history. What is the cold consistency behind every rule we've discussed? Not one of these actions is about controlling her behavior. They are mechanisms of strict discipline and emotional management of yourself. The brutal truth, the ultimate twist of dark psychology. You cannot control another sovereign human being. The reason you failed in the past wasn't because you lacked technique. It's because you were living in a state of civil war, an inner anarchy. You were a slave to your own impulses and needs, a slave to lust, a slave to the need for validation, a slave to the primal fear of loneliness. This is the shadow Carl Jung spoke of, the weak, dependent, craving parts we try to hide, yet they rule our behavior from within. When you cannot master your shadow, you will forever be a beggar. When you ruthlessly conquer these inner slaves, when you become the man who no longer needs anything from her, when you become the source of your own validation, you stop being a chaser. You become a psychological black hole. Your pull doesn't come from coercion, it comes from order inside you. She doesn't submit to your anger or aggression. She yields to your unshakable peace. That is the power of stillness. Control is not harm or fear. Control is the absolute stillness of your own mind. When you are the most solid, composed element in the room, everything else, every emotion, every reaction, every fluctuation of hers, must orbit your stable axis. So don't go out and waste energy playing cheap tricks on other people. The real battlefield is between your ears. Your mission is to manage your own mind ruthlessly. Close the nice guy as an outdated version of you. He is weak, afraid, and a liar. Give birth to the prince. He is strong because he is honest about what he wants, and he doesn't apologize for existing. The world is waiting for you to claim your throne. But that throne isn't a social position. It's buried deep in your soul. And if you want, right now, you can turn this ending into a promise to yourself. If you're ready to stop begging and start ruling, engrave this in the comments. Type, "I choose power,"